Today I'd like to talk a bit more about why becoming mentally well isn't a purposeful thing, i.e. it's not why it isn't something that we can take charge of ourselves and make it happen because we want to make it happen, because we have whatever skills, whatever knowledge, whatever determination is necessary to make it happen. So this is a very prevalent myth in our culture, in our society. And like any prevalent myth, it's not easily challenged, but it can be challenged easily, not easily, but it can be challenged all the same if we're willing to do so, if we are interested in challenging it. And I would say that the desire or the interest in challenging the orthodox view, whatever the orthodox view is itself the epitome of mental health. The day we stop challenging and questioning is the day we die, really. Our minds will be overtaken by a swarm of imprints, a swarm of mind viruses, a swarm of beliefs that will take us over in a flash if we don't have that spark to look at things in a critical way and question them. No matter what it is, we have to question it. We don't have to question it at all, but it's better for us if we do. There's a better outcome, a healthier outcome. So one way to look at why becoming mentally well isn't a purposeful thing is to realize that we don't know what being mentally well is. We haven't a clue. All we've got to go on is the way things are right now. So we can extend that. We can make it more efficient. We can optimize our game. We can all sit around and collectively validate it, say how good it is, and defend it from all upsetting influences. So that's the conservative approach, but that's nothing to do with mental wellness. That's trying to fight mental wellness. That's how we fight it. By trying to say the way we are right now is the right way, and any deviations from that are errors that need to be stamped out immediately. So that's the equilibrium view of mental health, to say that mental health is where we are now or where we were. So if I'm actually in the middle of depression or in the middle of suffering from anxiety or whatever it is, I'll say, well, mental health is where I was before I became afflicted by the mental suffering that I'm now afflicted with. So this is the recovery idea. I was mentally well then, and I'm going to recover it, and everyone will support me in that. So that's equilibrium thinking as well, because I was not. There's no such thing as a place where we are which is mentally well. It's all movement, it's all change, and if we stay in any position long enough, no matter how good it might have been or might have seemed to start off with, it turns into a very rotten place. It turns bad on us because we're refusing to change. So, like Jung says, the better is the enemy of the good. Doesn't make any sense, because if good is good, then better is better. And if I like good, I'll like better even more. So better is better than good. But it doesn't work like that, not psychologically speaking. And because it doesn't work like that, we hang on to the good and we fight the better. Because we don't see it as better, we see it as having to let go of the way we see things, which it is. We see it as moving out of the comfort of the equilibrium state into the uncharted territory of disequilibrium, where we don't know what's right and what's wrong, and what is good and what's bad, and what's the helpful thing and what isn't the helpful thing. In other words, that's actually reality. The equilibrium zone is never reality. It's only ever a comforting little game that we play, and which we validate as part of our ongoing attempt to escape reality. And naturally, we don't see things like this. We don't see that the thing that's really going on in life is that we're trying to escape from reality. We see it the other way round. We see we already know what reality is, and we're fighting against whatever we'd want to call it: ignorance, destabilizing influences, the devil, whatever. We're fighting against the devil. So whenever we're fighting against the devil, that means we're trying to protect our arbitrary and ultimately entrapping equilibrium zone. The devil really means change. So we're fighting change. But the more we fight change, the more we suffer. So we're really backing ourselves into a corner there. So even though we might say to look upon life as being our ongoing attempt to hide from the truth or escape from reality, that sounds, that's putting us in a bad light, isn't it? That doesn't sound that heroic or anything like that. We think, oh no, that's kind of negative talk, because we hate negative talk. We really do hate negative stuff because we love the positive. We love positive stuff, positive psychology. And we love that. But in actual fact, even though it might sound a bit weird to us, a bit strange to us, it's got a lot more potential in it. Because as soon as we see things in that way, that opens up so much for us. It opens up the possibility of, hey, maybe we don't know what life is all about, and once we see this, maybe we can find out about that, find out more about it. Maybe we don't know what reality is. We all think, of course, we know what reality is, but maybe we don't know what reality is. Maybe all we know are our mind-created delusions, our societal games. Maybe that's all we know, which are sterile, which are pointless, which are an exercise in putting off the fateful day when we do have to face up to reality. And we know that day is going to come, but we want to put it off. And we'll also put off knowing that we're putting it off. So we imagine that we're progressing. So the equilibrium mode of psychological existence relies very much on this thing called progressing, which basically means that we refuse to acknowledge that what we're doing is postponing the inevitable, the inevitability of discovering that we're only trying to hide from reality. That's another way of talking about positive thinking. It's a better way because it makes, it's clearer, makes things clearer. That's good, things clear. So you could say, oh no, but that's negative. It's negative from the point of view of the delusion. It's negative from the point of view of that aspect of us which wants to refuse to admit that our lies are actually just lies, just fictions. That's negative from that point of view, obviously. So that's fair enough. So if that's what we mean, yeah, that's negative. But very clearly, once we actually see everything backwards in this way, and we see that, hey, we don't know what reality is because we've been doing our damnedest to avoid knowing anything about it. We've been doing our damnedest to run from the truth of openness, the truth of, well, actually, you thought you know, but you don't. And no matter what you know, you always find out, oh, but you thought you knew that, but you don't. So the truth of openness is what we're running from, because it doesn't really give us anything to hold on to, obviously. We want to hold on to something and then kind of like bury our heads and go to sleep. That's we want our equilibrium zone to crawl into. And okay, when we do crawl into it, something inside us will die, as Frank Herbert says, in the absence of new experiences. Whatever it is, that thing in us, it'll just peter out. What's the point in hanging around to see the same old bullshit, which we keep on having to say isn't bullshit? What's the point in that? So the best part of us doesn't see the point in that. The best part of us is not going to stick around for that kind of nonsensical rigmarole. So what does stick around is a kind of a reflex, an avoidance reflex, a denial reflex, whatever you want to call it, a mental reflex of tricks that we do to carry on perpetuating our ignorance, as is the habitual way, the traditional way, the time-honoured way. We have to keep on protecting the ignorance, after all. That's our allegiance to the ignorance. And also our allegiance is to remaining ignorant of the fact that our allegiance is towards perpetuating the ignorance, which I know I already said in a slightly different way. So when we see all this, the initial shock is, oh no, I'm busted. But then following this, our horizons open up, and there's all these possibilities, because when we realize that we weren't actually mentally well anyway, we don't get all nostalgic about it and sentimental about it and hanker to get back there, because it's a journey. It's not a fixed defined point forever. That's always going to be good. It's just another stepping stone and a stepping stone and a stepping stone, which means continuous work, continuously taking on radically new ways of looking at things and letting go of the old ways. Work, just like being in a gym. Gymnasium is work. Being in reality is work. J.G. Bennett says reality is work. If we're not in hiding mode, if we're not trying to hide from reality, if we have discovered that work isn't an onerous thing, it's not a punishment, because as soon as we wholeheartedly work, we are given the energy. The energy comes to us, the vitality comes to us to do that, to be in that situation. And so that's actually called living. Being in an uncharted situation, not knowing how we're going to do it, but being wholeheartedly in it, so that we discover actually we can do it, even though we don't know how and we haven't got any strategies, methodologies, psychological formulae to tell us in advance, oh yeah, when this happens, that happens. We haven't got anything like that, and yet it works. Don't know how it works. It's but that's the via veritas. That's what works. It's called taking the plunge, letting go and seeing what happens, which is so antithetical to our whole way of thinking. So antithetical. We want to control, we want to be in charge, and we want to believe that mental wellness can come about as a result of our being in charge. But how could it? Because what is it that is in charge? It's a reflex for avoiding reality. That's what's in charge. It's not anything greater than that. It's just this reflex of running, reflex of hiding. We let that be in charge, and it'll find a way to get us to somewhere mentally healthy. But then what we mean by mentally healthy there is the ability to hide without suffering from the inevitable consequence of hiding. So when we hide from reality, the inevitable consequence is that we create a sterile pseudo-world for ourselves, in which everything is recycled time, recycled ideas, over and over again. And yes, that is how we escape from reality. But also, yes, that is extraordinary suffering. So what we mean by mental health is to be in that recycled world, that bubble of insulating pseudo-reality, without suffering from the pain that goes with it. And that prospect sounds really good to us because it's like, yes, that's what we want. We have the technology to bring that about because we're intoxicated by technology and we think we can get anything to happen as a result of technology, even something which is obviously as insane as that. So we are incapable of looking at it the other way because our mind governs us. The mind is an equilibrium phenomenon. It has a framework and it operates out of that framework, and it will validate its own framework and defend its own framework to the end. But it's only a framework. It's a static fixture in a world in which there are no static fixtures. That is how thought works. Obviously, it is how thought works, because if thought didn't work like that, we would just be engulfed in torrents of newness and torrents of novelty the whole time that we can't make sense of. But the mind wants to make sense of it, so we have to have this context which is always there, with which we can make new stuff make sense. In other words, by the use of which we can make new stuff the same as all the old stuff, so it isn't new stuff anymore. So that's our mechanism. That's our mechanism for running away from reality. So if we're prepared, however tentatively, to take that on board and say, okay, well, supposing that could be the way things are, which is all we have to do, is just to look at things that way and then see, well, what does it look like when we adopt this way of looking at things? So in this way of things, we discover that all of our purposeful efforts, no matter what, across the board, are for the sake of perpetuating the status quo, the framework. They're for the sake of validating the framework. Absolutely every purposeful action we can ever do is just the framework, the static framework, trying to consolidate itself. There's absolutely no purposeful way for thought to act against itself or move beyond itself. So like the Zen saying says, you can't wash away blood with more blood. Yeah, we could also say you can't CBT away error type thinking with more thinking, because when it comes down to all, thinking is about maintaining the status quo of the framework. So talking about thoughts which are got flaws, faulty thoughts, logically flawed thoughts, and thoughts which are good and which are sound, it doesn't make any difference because they're all there for the sake of perpetuating the framework. So because thought is our operating system, we can't do anything to become mentally well, or more truly who we are. We can't do anything to become more whole. But there is this tendency, there is this energy or force within us which, for want of any better way of putting it, wants to expand. It wants to move on. It's fed up of hiding out in the pseudo-reality bubble. It's fed up. It wants to know what's out there. That's the best part of us, the true part of us, the heroic part of us. He doesn't want to be playing this stupid societal game. He wants to see what's really out there. Why wouldn't you be curious? You're living in this pseudo-reality made up of all this made-up bullshit that is infinitely sterile and futile and pointless, and it'll never do you any good, no matter how much you obsess over it. And then we think, well, I wonder what the real reality is like. What's it really like, aside from what we all say it's like? So that's Joseph Campbell's call to adventure. And according to Joseph Campbell, at some point or other, maybe a few times, we all hear that call to adventure. And also, according to Joe Campbell, for the most part, we determinedly ignore it and go back to the playpen, which is our prerogative. I mean, there's no moral issue here. There's no one going to come and kick you up the backside and say you're not being heroic, because that turned the whole thing stupid. In that case, you'd obey the guilt, or you'd obey the boot that's kicking you up the backside and say, okay, I have to be heroic because I'm frightened of being punished, and it's obviously the good thing to do. So we'd be conforming just like we always conform every day of our lives. We'd be conforming to this carrot and stick type thing. That's how structure works. That's how the equilibrium zone works. Reward and punishment. And we have this thing called morality, which is just a carrot and stick. It's just coercion, bullying, lack of freedom. And reality isn't like that. Reality contains freedom. It gives us the freedom to do whatever we want, play whatever games we want, and hide out in those games as long as we want. We're not being bad, but we will inevitably have a miserable time. So it could be said that in a way, although reality facilitates anything we want to do, at the same time we have to face up to the consequences, which is the pain and the suffering, the neurotic torment that comes as a result of living entirely within a world that we have ourselves have said is the world, our version of the world, our distorted, prejudiced, narrow little version of the world, which is safe for us because we can hang out there forever or for a long time without having to do any work, without having to be challenged by reality. But there is this movement that will take us, either with us going along with it or fighting and kicking and screaming against it, depending on whether we have a spirit of adventure or not, that will take us out of the equilibrium zone, into a strange world where we don't know what right is and what wrong is, and where everything isn't just being recycled the whole time. And that is the direction of becoming mentally more well, because to be mentally well is to act on the call to adventure, not to hide from it. Okay, thanks for watching.